Chinwag on the line. Chinwag.
Welcome to the Chinwag. Every time I just start cracking up.
I know why. There's something funny about it.
I think because you give me this look like we're about to enter like an old time radio play, and it's going to be there's a lot of stakes involved.
That's awesome.
I don't know why. It just cracks me up.
Well, that's an odd thing. Yeah, it is a little bit like suddenly we're on the air and we got to have something to say and we got to go.
Exactly.
And it is interesting. It's very interesting.
We don't have a script exactly, so it's always like there's no net.
We sure don't. If anybody thinks we do, if we had any appearance of having a script, it would be really deceitful. I've never quite worked so without a net before in my life as we do on this thing.
It's high-level improvisation here.
It really kind of is.
Yeah, it's multi-dimensional chess improvisation is what we're talking about.
Multi-dimensional chess. Three-dimensional chess. Are you a chess player, actually? I don't think I've ever asked you. Are you a chess guy?
I am. I'm not bad, but my son kicks my ass every time.
Interesting.
Little bastard.
He's good. My son was certainly better at it than I was, because I was like, that's one of those things I've always wanted to be good at it.
Yeah. It's a great game.
I wish I was good at it, but everything about me, every molecule of my being is set in opposition to being any good in chess. It's like everything about me, I was like the perfect person designed to just suck at chess. Because I have like no logic, nothing.
No long-term strategy, no long game.
Nothing. I can't strategize, no long game. I have no logic, nothing. I can't retain information. Because apparently a lot of it is sort of remembering patterns and sort of scenarios.
You study the openings, you study like scenarios,
And I'm like, you got to be kidding me! And it's always like the Chartov Migursky opening, of 1923 in Glasgow, and you're like, you're fucking kidding me! And it's like. And it's the same thing. One guy just moves the pawn. Like, I'm thinking, you got to be kidding me. This is a thrilling opening. It's like watching Kabuki. When I was telling you how in Kabuki I'd watch some guy just, shift his hand slightly and the audience would just erupt in applause.
Like it was so significant.
Well, it was some famous moment when it's coming up where the guy's going to shift his hand and he did it just beautifully. He executes that little move. And I feel like just the same thing. Somebody just does something and everybody goes, oh, everybody just and like the opening too. The guy, the first move, everybody goes, oh my God, it's exactly like the fucking,
and then sometimes there's an opening and then some chess master will just stand up and shake the hand like, okay, we're done here. My ass is kicked. Yeah, I'm already done.
This is the McGillicuddy Horvath versus Horvath, played in Budapest in 1911. You're like, what the fuck? You got to be kidding me. I can't even do the thing of like when you see the chess games in the newspaper and stuff.
Yeah, they're like, what would you do next?
Pawn to what? Which is the knight to queen 5? I can't get that straight in my head. I get really confused about it because I'm always like, oh, yes, okay. I'm going to do this thing where I'm going to follow the chess games in the newspaper. And I'm like, fuck it, I can't do it. It's always disappointing. You're
a checkers man is what I'm hearing from you. You're more of a checkers man.
I suck at games in general. I'm terrible at games. Yeah, I'm fine with checkers. Like, it's simple enough. Tic-tac-toe and shit like that. I'm good at kind of word games. Like, I like Boggle. Boggle's good. Where you sort of like, Boggle, you shake up the letters and then you have to make as many letters. Like, that kind of thing I'm good at.
I do think people who are really good with language, their brains seem to be a little different from the people who are more like quantitative. Although chess is weird because it's like so spatial.
Yeah.
But I think of it as a mathematics game. I don't know why.
I do too. And which is why I suck at it, because I have to count on my fingers basically still. I'm no good. This reminds me though, I said Budapest and all that stuff. One thing, a thing I did that was really cool once. I worked in Budapest. You've been in Budapest?
No, I have not.
It's a really cool city. It's a really cool city.
I've heard great things.
Yeah, it's definitely worth checking out if you ever can. There's I'm a cemetery guy. I like going to cemeteries.
So do I.
Yeah. Yes, and we've done it.
We were just at a cemetery.
We just went to a cemetery
in Boston.
In Boston, a great one. And I went to this huge cemetery in the middle of Budapest that's really old and weird, but you get the sort of history of the whole area. There's a whole Soviet area of it with all these Soviet apparatchiks, Hungarian Soviet guys buried in this kind of like really ugly, kind of brutalist, monolithic, like walls with their names carved in them. And then there's these old ones, old weird mausoleums, and old kind of almost like spooky Hammer horror movie looking kind of like kind of
you're
stuff.
really painting a great picture
Oh,
here.
it's amazing. It's all overgrown with vines and stuff. It's really crazy looking. And it was really cool. I was wandering around this place, and a lot of it's been not very well tended to. So there's grass growing almost to your waist in some places. It's very spooky, and parts of it feel very abandoned.
Post-apocalyptic.
Yeah, I feel very abandoned and weird and spooky and horror movies. And I remember walking around it once with this friend of mine while we were there. We stumbled on this little area way off in a corner, a little niche part of the cemetery that was all put aside for the great Hungarian chess champions. And the tombstones were giant chess pieces a lot of the time. They were sort of like waist-high, chest-high chess pieces. And it was all like, Ivan Horvath, Attila, whoever, all these guys from the 19th century and the early 20th century, the great chess, because I think there were a lot of Hungarian chess masters.
I think that's right.
And I was like, this is cool. This is like...
Were people leaving little chess pieces there as like devotional items?
They very well might have been. Yeah.
That reminds me, when we were just at this crazy cemetery in Boston, you and I were looking at this. We were looking at a gravestone, and we were like, "Oh, we're reading about this woman named Anne Goose."
It was very worn away. It was a sort of
could barely read it.
1700s, I think. So 18th century. Yeah.
And then this woman walks up to us and goes like, "Oh, you found the Mother Goose grave," and we were like, "What?"
Well, we were making fun of it. We were like, "These people are named Goose." I was like, "The woman's name is Anne Goose, and her husband's name is Isaac Goose," and we were like, "Ha ha ha, I Goose," and we were like making fun of it.
And there was a pen on the ground.
Yes,
right. There was a pen on the ground.
That was it. I was just going to say. Then we were wondering why the hell somebody left a pen.
Yeah.
And then, some intelligent person came up and was
not
like,
us.
Yeah, not us. Not the two idiots making fun of the whole thing. Comes up and is like, "Oh, this is Mother Goose." I'm like, and I had no idea Mother Goose. I thought Mother Goose was a legendary character.
I thought she was herself folklore. I thought she was fictional.
Right.
Wow. Maybe we got schooled big time.
Totally. I remember realizing, it was not till I was well along in my life that I was like, oh, the Brothers Grimm were actual guys. They were real guys.
Right. And apparently Hans Christian Andersen is somebody real.
A real guy. Well, that I knew. I knew because of the Danny Kaye movie when I was a kid. You ever see that movie?
Yeah.
Awesome movie. Oh, Jesus. Well, all that expensive education just right down the toilet.
Right down the toilet.
Right down the crapper. Right down the poop. Well, here we are at the Chinwag. Already chinwagging.
This is really a great guest and a great topic. People are going to really enjoy this, I think.
Really amazing. But before we get to that, we'll just run through our order of business here.
Yeah. Our usual thing is like to remind our fine fans, of whom we met many on this recent little tour, get down there and rate and review us. Please send us your questions, your comments. Give us some love on the Apple podcast app.
Yep.
We really appreciate it.
Yep. And if you feel so inspired, spread the joy, spread the love, spread the wisdom, spread the good news.
Spread the good news, the gospel of Chinwag.
Spread the gospel of Chinwag. And, text a link of your favorite episode to the members of your sanctum sanctorum right now, to the inner circle.
Especially those the Budapest Chinwaggers need to step up given Paul's
it's true. All of our followers in Hungary. I bet we have one or two.
I bet we do.
I remember somebody said to, I can't remember what great luminary this was. It might have been Orson Welles. And somebody said something about the Martian invasion. And they said, "Do you think the planet will ever be invaded by Martians?" And he said, "The Martians are already here. They're called Hungarians." And it was because they are an extraordinarily interesting people. They're a really interesting people.
Oh, that's great.
Really. Their language is crazy. And
yeah. But I had a friend who was my attaché in Cambodia. He was Hungarian. Shout out to Peter Pop. And I remember him saying to me, like, I bet you can't figure out my ethnicity, but from looking at my name. And his name is Jale Pop. And it's like, I was looking at like, what kind of, and I'm pretty good at this kind of stuff. And he was like, "I'll just tell you, I'm Hungarian." Nobody can ever get it, he said.
Yeah, well, and they're extraordinary, interesting people. Anyway.
He was a good egg.
Keep the ratings going and comments and questions coming, etc. Okay. Moving on, shall we?
Yes.
To today's very special guests, an award-winning artist, writer, and curator who focuses on the socially challenged body. She is perhaps best known for representations of people whose physical embodiment, sexuality, or gender identity have long been stigmatized. Her work has been featured at the Smithsonian's National Portrait Gallery, Yale University, and the United Nations, and her memoir, Golem Girl, is really it's a great book. It's fantastic.
Yeah, it is a really good book. I highly recommend.
Yeah, it has some of her paintings in it, and she's an amazing artist. Check that out. We are very thrilled that she could join us on Chinwag today. Please welcome Riva Lehrer to the Chinwag.
I'm thrilled. I'm completely thrilled.
Yeah, very nice to have you.
We have known each other for many years, but I can't remember exactly how we met. Do you remember how we met?
I think I actually heard you talking on a radio show.
Okay.
And about monsters. And I was like, who is this man? And then you mentioned Chicago. And I was like, oh my God, he's actually here in Chicago, where I happen also to be in Chicago. So I think I wrote you an email or something, and then we started talking. But your work has really influenced my work tremendously for years.
Well, likewise. Yeah, Riva's a writer and an artist. We're going to talk about all this stuff, but you're really a multi-talented person. Yeah.
Thank you.
That's almost exactly how Steve and I met too, actually. I heard Steve, I've randomly came across, I don't know how this happened. I came across the fact that he was giving a lecture about imagination and consciousness. It wasn't about monsters, but then I saw that he was a guy who talked about monsters and cryptozoology and cryptids, and I thought, oh, I got to check this guy out. And I heard it, and I thought, this is amazing. This guy is talking about stuff that I am interested in, but have never been able to articulate anything about quite the way he's doing it. So I wrote him a message. The same thing happened.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, same thing happened. I just was like, this guy sounds really amazing.
That's how I get all my connections.
That's pretty good, Steve. You're doing pretty well.
Just stand in place and the fan club will find you.
Just stand there and talk. It's like, it's amazing.
I wish,
really.
But it's only the quality people coming through, so I'm happy about that.
Whatever it is.
But I thought it would be cool to just start with, everybody should get a chance to tell their origin story. And I'm thinking, Riva, you have a fascinating origin story. Can you give us just like a brief, like a thumbnail sketch of like just how life started for you? And I know this is like a big story, and you have a memoir called Golem Girl, which is amazing. So people need to go and pick that up.
Thank you.
What can you tell listeners that just sort of gives us a picture of the beginning of Riva Lehrer?
So I was born in 1958, and it was immediately obvious that I had spina bifida, which is where there are different levels of spina bifida. It literally means split spine. And it means that part of your spinal cord, at least in my case, actually extrudes outside the body. And so I was immediately taken over to Children's Hospital in Cincinnati, where an amazing surgeon put my spine back in the cord back inside me.
Wow.
And this is in 1958? Is this when this is?
And they had
Amazing.
just invented the surgery to do this.
Yeah.
Wow.
So there aren't a lot of people older than me. And my mother was a medical researcher, which meant that she resisted all of the calls to institutionalize me, which is what they did with children back then, just automatically. So I got to grow up with a family, mostly good news. Depends what day. But
that's true for all of us.
Yeah, I survived my childhood. I went to, and Paul, you might like to talk to me about this later. I went to a quote special school that was also haunted.
Oh, fantastic.
And I know you're interested in ghosts.
Very much so. Very much so.
But after high school, I went to art school, and lots of story there. But I think what we're aiming for is that when I went to art school, I never saw images of people with impairments. I'm deeply interested in portraiture. I'm a professional figure portraitist, but not the way people normally think of it. My portraiture has very different aspects. But what I realized is that the history of art was almost entirely absent images of people with impairments. They show up in particular places that we can talk about later. Usually lepers.
A lot of lepers and
Jesus
religious paintings, right? Yeah.
Exactly. Jesus looking glowy and the leper looking filthy. And
Glowy.
so that's us.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I decided that there really had to be, I wanted to make portraits of people like me. I mean, not specifically like me, but people who undergo stigma. It's really stigma that fascinates me. So I've done hundreds of portraits, and they're all based in ethics, which is another reason that I was interested in Steve and what he does, because the intersection of what it means to look at someone when being looked at is really uncomfortable. And so that I think my thumb fits in there somewhere.
No, that's great. That's helpful.
Yeah. No, I was really interested actually in a lot of the stuff that it seems to come up in interviews I'd read with you and in your book about looking and staring and seeing and sort of eye contact and not eye contact. And I thought all of that, I mean, we can talk about that further or not, but I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, let's follow up on that a little bit. There's the kind of this idea of the gaze that first you're going to have to correct our language probably throughout this whole thing. But if I say like if a disabled person, if a disabled person has a much more it's like they can't get away from people's gaze. It's like constantly on them. This is how it seems to me. Is that something that you're exploring that obviously, but that seems like a hell of a burden to have to be looked at all the time.
Yeah. It's, if you stick out even a little bit, you'll draw attention. I'll tell you something really weird.
Yeah.
Dogs are upset at me.
What?
Yeah. Dogs are and I love dogs and I've had dogs.
Yeah.
But I'm unusual enough that I'll get barking and growling. And
really?
What about other kinds of animals? Do other animals have a similar?
Just the only ones I know of are dogs because they're so socialized.
Yeah, right.
Dogs have an idea of normal, oddly enough.
Right. They have a sense of what's supposed to be proportioned correctly and things like that. Right.
Exactly. And how I'm supposed to walk. They do not like how I walk. They're like my orthopedist. They really want me to get with the program.
Yeah, thanks a lot,
dogs and orthopedists. They're like this.
Hey, fuck them. Those dogs, what do they know?
Fascinating. But it's interesting because Steve actually said to me that you said to him once that being disabled is being performative in some way.
Yeah, you said something.
And that sounded really interesting to me. And it seemed to link up to the idea of being looked at all the time in some way. Is that true? Is that what you mean by that?
That's 2/3 of it. I mean, when you're looked at, you have to decide, are you going to acknowledge it? Are you going to welcome it? Are you going to tell people to F themselves? Are you?
Interesting.
And it's different day by day. And think about when you're out on the street and you're looking at somebody and someone is wearing a wonderful outfit or their hair is fabulous or they remind you of someone you love and you look at them, think about what your face is doing.
Yeah.
Like your face usually is radiating some kind of pleasure and welcome. But then think about when you're on the street and you pass someone that you find disturbing. Maybe they're filthy. Maybe they're very, their morphology is very different. Think about what your face is doing then. And usually an adult will kind of peer and scowl. It's something they don't understand. Kids will be more direct and just be like, either what is that or blah. So when you're being looked at and you're different, it's not a neutral gaze. Someone isn't just tracking you. They are telling you what they feel. And so one of the things I tell people is there's so much, I find incredible beauty in people who are different. I think all the time about there's so many ways to be a human. There's just so many ways. And like how glorious that is. And like, think about that when you look at someone different, like they're interpreting humanity their way. And it absolves you of the burden of deciding humanity is one thing, or, you know what I mean? Like let it open you, let it just make you bigger. And then being looked at, if you're looked at with pleasure, hardly anybody is going to hit you with their cane. the way I want to all the time,
Yeah.
and yet still restrain myself. Because I hear jail is just not a
It's not good. Not good.
No, it can't possibly be any good. I have a sort of, remember, Steve, really early on in one of our episodes, I have a bit of a sort of pet theory that what's considered grotesque or is considered abnormal or away from the normal is what's unique. And to me, unique is beautiful. So in actual fact, the definition that we think of beauty is sort of uniformity and all these things.
Yes.
That's actually, to me, boring.
Yeah.
And actually,
I love
it's
you,
actually, I love you too, Riva. And it's like, it's boring, actually. But it's also kind of uniformity and all those things. So I've always thought, because I have a sort of, I suppose I have a kind of aesthetic bent or some kind of where I'm like interested, and some of it's probably prurient and fucked up. It's not necessarily a healthy interest in what is seen as abnormal or something like that, right? Okay, but as I've gotten older, I've thought, what is it? And I've thought, as I've matured, what I think is it's unique. What's unique is what's beautiful, actually.
There is a kind of research that's out there that shows that humans are drawn to difference because your mind is just set up to solve problems in a quick and ready way. And when something is outside the norm or it's atypical, it draws your attention. But I think, like what Riva's saying, I think it's so often that attention is negative or it's
negative.
Yes.
It's not a pure curiosity.
No.
But then you can cultivate a taste for, like you said, like you can open yourself up so that what is different is actually pleasing and attractive, and it's fascinating. Is that a personality type or it's a cultural training? What is it?
I think most things are cultural training. I really do. I mean, the whole thing where a parent might like slap their kid and say, stop staring, instead of, saying something about, isn't that a cool wheelchair? Look for the thing that is intriguing to you, or decide to just glance and look away so that the person doesn't feel objectified. Those are different choices. But I did a lot of research on beauty years ago when I was writing my book. I'm really interested in the neurology of beauty, or like the perception neurology.
Yeah.
And one of the bizarre things that I read in one of the studies is that when you're looking around, you decide whether someone is beautiful before you even recognize them. Like, you can see your spouse down the street, and in the nanosecond before you recognize that's your spouse, you have a category perception about whether or not your spouse is attractive.
Oh, it's instantaneous.
That just killed me.
That's interesting.
We had when my son and I were living in China, there was a woman there that had hydrocephaly, and in some developing parts of the world where you can't get some basic medical procedures when you're young, then fairly not so dramatic illnesses turn to be dramatic. And so she had a huge hydrocephalic head.
Probably had spina bifida.
Maybe so.
That's the main cause of hydrocephaly.
Really?
And go on.
And she was out on the street, and her family would drop her off every morning, and they had built, it was obviously a very poor family, they had built a wooden frame so that her head wouldn't, the neck wouldn't turn. And so it looked, tough. And my son was like 4 or 5, and we would have to pass her every day to go to work. And he was quite naturally curious, like, are we going to see the big-headed lady again today, Dad? Yeah. And I would just go up to her, and we'd say hello. Sometimes we'd give some money, kind of try to interact with her. It was a little awkward, but eventually my son wasn't disturbed at all. He was still intrigued for sure, but he wasn't there wasn't anything negative about it. But, that's not always the case.
No.
But in the neurology, I mean, you say, Steve, that it's like we're wired when something that deviates from the quote normal, it draws our attention. But are we in the neurology of sort of beauty, as you called it, Riva? Like, aren't we evolutionarily wired towards symmetry and stuff like that? Is that true? I mean, it's, you hear sort of things like that.
There are debates about that. Especially one of the things that totally intrigues me is the beauty hypothesis about animals, particularly birds.
Oh,
You may have heard about this,
No.
but
no.
the idea that like a peacock, one of the reasons that male birds will use a lot of their resources, I mean, not that they can help it, but they're developed so that a lot of their resources, meaning the food that they're eating, the rest that they're getting, is going towards producing these spectacular feathers, because the female, the peahen, is going to be drawn to the bird with the best feathers, and that's who's going to get to mate. And that beauty, male beauty, actually is a huge driver of animal mating. So people have been doing research on this, and some of this says yes, others say no, it's actually not true at all. This is one of the problems with how ideas about disability have developed. So imagine pre-modern medicine. So I'm back up a tiny bit and forgive me. In the history of portraiture, portraiture mostly was commissioned for centuries. And you'd commission them for various reasons. Sometimes it would be marriage portraits, where you'd have your daughter painted and then it would go, be curried over to the next town, where there was a marriageable. So this is what she looks like.
Right.
And so there's that.
Right.
That's what Holbein was doing for Henry VIII,
really?
which cracks me up. Yeah, just sorry.
Yes.
Wait a minute. He was doing it for Henry VIII.
Please.
How? So he was painting the pictures of the women to take to Henry VIII?
Yes, exactly,
Yes.
to see if he liked them.
Oh, that's why.
Yes.
That's why he was in the court of Henry VIII.
Yeah.
That's why. Oh, wow. Okay, I didn't know that. That's hilarious.
10 points, Steve. You're exactly right.
That's hilarious. I didn't know that.
But then you'd have a portrait made of yourself, and you're always supposed to look powerful and affluent. And one of the things I always talk about is you're not gesturing. Like I'm sitting here gesturing like crazy and not trying not to hit the table. But in those portraits, no one ever gestures. What they're doing is they're being very still. It's not just that the painter wants that, because if you look at other paintings by, Titian, people are flailing all that over the place.
That's true.
And the painter's like,
That's true.
look, I can paint flailing. Isn't this
That's
great?
true. Exactly. You're really action-packed. Yeah.
But the portrait is very still. And part of that is you're in control of your body. Health means being in control of your body. So
Interesting.
you're showing
Yeah.
that you're healthy and powerful. And so the whole history of, like, nobody smiles big because their teeth are all terrible. So you ever see teeth? Like skin diseases were everywhere. You never see that. One of my closest friends is a curator of medical history. And she's always telling me, like, yeah, they would have just been pocked all over the place.
Oh, totally. Right.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. Right.
So, but the thing is, if you had a disabled child, a son, or either one, you don't do their portrait, because that's not who you want to have go breed.
Yeah.
Because nobody had any idea of what caused anything or how to
Yeah.
cure anything. So you hid the fact that you had a disabled family member. And so if you're in a situation where there's just no knowledge of why things happen, except a lot of mythology, which I won't even go there. Steve,
And religion.
religion, mythology about why your kid looks like that. That's why we're so missing, because everything about portraiture up until fin de siècle, 19th century, end of the 19th century, that's where everything changes. But all the way up to then, just about, a portrait is about being, as they say, an advertisement for myself.
Yeah.
And so disability is hidden. And so if you see somebody who's disabled and you have no idea what's causing it, no idea whether that might replicate itself if you let your child have children, is your family going to get to be known as the family that has, the kids with no arms?
Right.
Yeah.
Nobody knew anything about heredity. They had no idea.
No.
And it was also like there's this kind of, what I like about your work too is it's reversing this usual trajectory, which is oftentimes there's like people are being turned into quote unquote freaks and monsters. They're sort of being dehumanized by so many things, religion, culture, and you're sort of reversing it out and taking people that have been on the outside, atypical bodies, atypical minds, and sort of humanizing them and making them into persons through portraiture. But I have a sort of a much simpler question for you, which was, because I know that you're like Paul and you're into monsters, and your book talks about this. And I know that you used to watch these horror sort of creature feature movies with your brothers, you said, which is something that Paul and I did a lot. Yeah,
absolutely.
And you said that you used to watch Frankenstein, the movie, but you kind of identified more with the monster. And I was just wondering if you could talk a little bit about like horror as a genre and monsters and how you connect to that stuff.
Well, I mean, ever since I have memory, people have told me I was a mistake of some kind.
Yeah.
And, doctors would call me deformed and related words like that all the time. And I knew pretty early that I didn't look like other people. And that I got, are you allowed to curse on here? Oh, yeah.
Sure.
Well,
We're going nuts. Yeah. It's a hobby for us.
Yeah, you kidding
I'm going
me?
to send you T-shirts where the F-bomb goes for a vacation.
Please. Please.
So people would give me shit constantly. And still do. And so so Frankenstein in particular, though, so we see him being born in this lab that to me looked like a regular operating room in a lot of ways.
Sure.
And, Mary Shelley doesn't really describe things that way, but the movies have really taken over our imagination. So I'm looking at this monster being created in what looks like an operating room. I have all these traumatic memories of the operating room. When he wakes up, you see all these scars. And then he has these giant freaking boots. And my boots, Steve has seen them. I have giant orthopedic boots.
Yeah.
In fact, they have names. The left one is George Burns and the right one is Gracie Allen.
Fantastic.
So,
that's nice.
They're badass.
It's awesome.
They're very badass. But so I would see him and I would see the way he walked.
Yeah.
And I teach anatomy, or I have taught it for years. And one of the things I would teach my kids is, so I would do the Frankenstein walk. And I would say, I wouldn't tell them it was Frankenstein. I would say, who walks like that?
Yeah.
And they'd say, monsters. I'd say, which monsters? Frankenstein. And then I would say, who else walks like that? And every once in a while, I'd get a bright kid who would say, a toddler. And because toddlers walk like that.
They do.
And
that's
the
right.
story of Frankenstein really is of, I think, a parent who has a disabled child, cannot deal with it, completely rejects the child. And the child is big enough and wounded enough to come after daddy.
Yeah.
And so it's this story.
Powerful. Yeah. And in some ways, he shouldn't be alive at all. He shouldn't have survived at all, is the other thing about Frankenstein. He shouldn't even be alive. It's like he's an aberration to begin with, and then he becomes even more aberrant in some weird way. That's amazing.
And he's a golem. That's the other thing is he is a golem.
Yeah, let's tell that story, like just real quick.
Yeah, I am interested in the golem. Tell briefly the golem thing.
Yeah.
And then
So there are a lot of legends about it. In Genesis, Adam is described as golmi, which means shapeless. So the idea is that the very first human ever is made of clay and is shapeless and is brought to life by the word of God. In the Golem, it's late 16th century, and Rabbi Yehuda ben Bezalel is in Prague, and he hears that there's going to be a pogrom. Do I need to explain pogrom?
Basically, like an anti-Semitic group is going to attack the so-called ghetto, right? I mean, it's essentially
attack and ruin and rape and kill,
eradicate. Yeah.
So that there's going to be a pogrom. So he has this mystic vision that he can make a man out of clay if he goes down to the river and makes this man. He gets his vision about how to bring it to life. So he does that, and the golem rises up, and it's big and it's made of clay. And some versions you can see that. Some versions he looks like just a giant human. And in some versions, the rabbi tells him to go out and just apprehend all the miscreants and put them in jail. In others, go kill them. So it depends which version you get.
So he's protection for the Jewish people.
He's protection for the Jews.
He's a protector of the ghetto. Yeah.
But he gets bigger and bigger every time he goes out.
Oh,
and he
I
comes
didn't know
back
that.
and he's bigger.
Oh.
And my interpretation of that is the monster has been in the world and is understanding the world and understanding itself in the world. So of course you get bigger, right? As that happens. And so he comes back and the rabbi is freaked out about how huge this thing is. And the main version of how the golem is brought to life is that the rabbi carves a word in his forehead. And the word is emet, which means truth. And in the end, he tricks the golem. He's afraid the golem's going to turn on the Jews. There's some sign that he's going to be out of control and that he might turn on the Jews. And so the rabbi tricks him into bending down, and he quickly wipes off the first letter, which is Aleph, and the word you're left with is met, which means dead. So that's when the golem falls into.
Wow.
But there's so many things that spin off of this.
Yeah.
And Frankenstein is
including Frankenstein, maybe.
Yeah.
Almost the ultimate story of the golem, a creature that gets beyond control. And in both versions, some versions, the golem falls in love. In, Frankenstein, he ruins love. He recognizes it's not going to be his. So, but there are so many golems out there.
And he's supposed to be in Prague. That's one of the legends, is that he's actually in the attic in the temple in Prague.
That the golem still exists, actually.
Yeah, and he's up in the attic.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And there's one version too where it's in his mouth, isn't it? That he puts a parchment. He puts parchment in the golem's mouth, and that brings him to life, and then he somehow manages to pull it out. Right. Oh my God. This is just as a side thing, but there's a very weird book called The Golem by a guy named Gustav Meyrink. Have you read that?
Oh, sure.
Riva? Yeah. Have you ever read that? Steve, have you read that book?
Yeah. I think, and then there was a film based on it too, an expressionist film,
Maybe.
I think, right?
I don't, is the film based on that book, or is the film is amazing. The film is great. The Golem is really cool.
Can I tell you a story about that?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
So a couple of years ago, there's a guy you guys totally need to have on named Michael Chambers, who runs.
I know him. Yeah, I know Michael.
You know Michael, dramaturgy.
I
at
think.
UC Santa Cruz, and so he founded this Institute for Monsterology, and he brought me out to talk about my book. But the big thing was that he had been working on restoring a version of Der Golem, which is the Yiddish way to say it, getting as many little fragments as they could from all over the world, including like from China, just little bits that had been missing. And he put it all together, and he did this sort of colorizing thing that apparently Paul Wegener, who did the film, had wanted to do. I'm a little unsure about where the color comes from, but it's just sheets of color, like whole scenes are really green. So he projected it in a room that's it was like the size of a large movie theater, the size of the wall. So you're watching Der Golem several times bigger than life. And then he had an orchestra. He had commissioned an orchestra to make a score and play it live.
Yeah.
I started crying.
Oh.
It was so moving.
Yeah, I bet.
Oh my God.
It's a crazy movie. Yeah.
Yeah.
I liked how you actually, you made a slip and said scare instead of score. It's actually, that was good. That was really good. That was a good slip.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, that was a good slip. That was a really good slip.
Fuck up in interesting ways.
No. That was a really good, because it is scary but the image of the golem in that is really cool. Yeah. It's a really cool looking creature. But that book is really strange. That Gustav Meyrink book is weird because, there you go.
Oh, you've got a golem. Oh,
man. Yeah,
Oh,
so cool.
listeners can't see this, but there's a wonderful.
Hopefully we can.
Doll. Is a
really
doll.
cool.
Action figure.
Really cool. But that face is really cool.
This is the golem from the movie.
That's the one from the movie. As
interpreted by Paul Wegener. And you see the giant boots?
Yes. Huge boots.
Yeah.
And in that one, did they borrow from that at all for Frankenstein, do you think? Did they look at that and take it?
There's a debate. Some people think that it was such a famous legend that Mary Shelley must have known. Other people are like, how is she wasn't a Jew? So I don't.
Right.
But then I wonder if Karloff.
But I mean, even for the movie of Frankenstein, if they
have.
both must have, right? Because the feet look exactly the same. That's interesting. But that Meyrink book is weird because the golem is a kind of figment almost of this guy's imagination in it. And it's almost like a projection and a doppelganger for himself. It becomes very weird and involved. It's a very strange book because it's like it becomes a kind of weird psychic image that he has of himself as the golem and stuff. It's really weird. It's a cool book.
Can I say one thing towards that? And I just love that you read that. One of these days, maybe Steve and I can do something about this. But in the study of the golem, the question is, who's to blame for the violence? Is it the golem or is it the rabbi? And the rabbi is just keeping his hands clean, but creating something.
Fascinating.
So when you say Meyrink, it's not so clear who is who.
Right.
Is the golem even separate from the rabbi?
That's right. That's right.
You know, is Frankenstein is the creature separate from Victor?
Right.
I mean,
right.
You know.
It's his child in theory, like you're saying. Yeah, so it's it's got some DNA in it.
To that same point, I've seen the golem used as a kind of metaphor or allegory for the sciences, sort of like Prometheus is sometimes used this way. It's made for the good, the protection of the community, but it doesn't really know itself where to go. It has to be directed. And like the sciences, they can make amazing energy, but they can also make nuclear bombs, and it really has a neutral status until it's given direction. That's kind of an interesting allegory.
Isn't Frankenstein subtitled The Modern Prometheus too? Isn't it the subtitle? And so it's Dr. Frankenstein who's the Prometheus, I guess. Or is it the monster in some way? Is the monster sort of trying to steal life when he shouldn't have life? Is that sort of the idea? I think it's debated.
I don't think it's clear.
It never occurred to me now until we're just having this, because I always thought it was Dr. Frankenstein was the Prometheus, but it might not be. Maybe the monster is. I mean, maybe the monster's being given he's trying to take something away that he shouldn't have, which is life,
I know that there were multiple editions too of the story, and that she as it got later and later, she kept tweaking and dialing up the anti-science. Like it's not really in the first edition, but it's more in the later editions. Like this is what's going to happen if you study science without the humanities. You end up creating chaos.
Yeah, I have to reread that book. I've got to reread that book. I haven't read it in a long time.
So good.
When I was talking. No, go on, please.
No, please, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I was talking to Steve earlier, and I said, a monster doesn't exist until it affects something. If you just have a monster on an island, it's not a monster. You know, it's not.
Just a
but
person.
As soon as it interacts with a person or an environment, that's when it becomes. And it's the same with science, right? If you just have a technique and it's sitting there.
It's no big deal.
Cool.
Yeah, right.
I was wondering about the language thing because I wanted to come back to this issue. We talked about the idea of the freak show and even the word freak, and the idea of sort of reclaiming language and appropriating language is important here, I think. And just like people may have like reappropriated like words like queer, or even, I guess, the N-word, there is a sense in which the disabled community has reclaimed certain words that were pejorative. And I've heard you use the word crip before, and I wonder if you could sort of educate us about, I mean, am I even allowed to say that? Is that like, what
you said it, Steve, you did it.
I know, like, do we need to edit that out?
I check next Tuesday.
Okay, all right. Let me get that going. But you know what I'm driving at.
I'm going to speak from the perspective of someone who believes in the politics, by which I mean that the central thing that drives me crazy and a lot of us crazy is mealy mouth language, first off. Like, I think I wrote somewhere, I said, I'll call myself differently abled the day I wake up with bat wings and horns, you know?
No, that's already an education because I thought that was okay. Like that's not a good one though. Okay,
no.
geez,
I mean,
good.
for those of us who are political, handy-capable, differently abled, I blocked them from my mind.
I get the idea.
We consider them mealy-mouthed. The movement is say the word, and the word is disabled. Disabled is not an insult. Disabled is both a political identity and a statement of fact. Although for some people, the politics is that disabled is your political identity because the world disables you, because most of your disability has to do with encountering the architecture of the world, the social expectations,
like stairs. Yeah.
stairs, both words, stairs and stairs.
Yeah.
So, and then the thing that your body does is called your impairment. So for me, my impairment is disability. My impairment is spina bifida. My disability is my political stance. Not everybody believes that. So the first thing is ask someone how they'd like to be referred to. There's something called person first language. So a lot of people like to say, I'm a person with a disability. Other people believe to go straight to the thing and say, I'm disabled. I believe the latter for the most part. But I mean, linguistics can sort of drive part of that. But the first thing is ask someone. CRIP for me has been a liberation because there's a little anger in it.
I was going to say, it's kind of badass sounding too, actually. Yeah.
Well, my boots, all the way up from the boots all the way to
the whole picture.
You see the hair, you see the hair. So that's really important, is to ask someone where they are. A lot of older people, like older gay people, don't like queer. I pride myself that I'm going to be 66 in 2 days, and I like crip and queers. So
happy birthday.
Happy birthday. Happy birthday.
But the language that backs off as if being disabled is shameful,
needs to be softened in some way.
Like
soft. Huh.
So that
you were saying there's a sort of reclaiming of the word dwarf was coming? Was something?
Some people in the short stature community, some people like short statures, some people like dwarfs, some people like little people. So ask, if there's a term, and then you can relax, and you'll learn something. Every time you'll learn something. But what drives me nuts, do you guys know about inspiration porn?
No.
Well, that has to be clarified. Let's define our terms here.
Yeah, totally.
I have an idea in my head, but it could be different from yours.
Yeah, I have a feeling it's different, Steve.
Some of us are very inspired by porn.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, this is different. Yeah.
This is different. Okay, so there's a billboard between me and the park. I live near the lake, so I go to the lake a lot. And there's one of these bus shelters that has decorative billboards inside. And the one I've been passing lately, it says, big picture of a guy in outdoor gear, and he's in some icy terrain. And it says, Eric so-and-so, he's related to Stanley, whoever, climbed Everest while blind. And then it says at the bottom, vision, and then it says, pass it on.
Yeah.
I'm sure you've seen these billboards, the pass it on thing.
Yes.
Foundation for a Better Life.
Yes.
So the idea is, it's called overcoming, and it's called super crip. So the idea is that we want our disabled people to overcome their impairments, so we don't have to deal with them. And then we want them to do something astonishing that will inspire us, the able-bodied, to be better.
I see.
So just in my life, and by the way, that foundation has some seriously right-wing pranks. Oh my God, look it up.
It's a kind of religious. It's a religious sort of idea. A lot of it. It's sort of much. It's
cure.
Very much the sort of.
The idea is cure. That the thing you want to do to a disabled person is cure them.
Yeah, it's like right. Yeah.
And it's laying on of hands.
Exactly. Yeah.
Or we want to feel Like, we don't want to, as a society, fund things like accessible parks. We want to have somebody come up with a climbing wheelchair that can go over grass without any problem, that costs $250,000.
Right.
But isn't that cool? And look how this person could overcome not being able to walk on grass.
Or end up on the end up on the International Space Station or something.
Exactly.
Sort of like
Top of Everest.
right. Amazing. That's interesting.
Yeah, you've experienced this too?
Oh, constantly. So in two ways. One is, my career is, on a good day, a career. And people will say, I don't know how you do it. You've been in the hospital so many times. You poor thing. I'm so impressed that, that I do anything. But on a daily basis, the way it works is I'm out at the lake. I'm doing my run. I have my little earbuds in. I'm listening to you guys most of the time lately.
All right, Chinwag.
Yeah, there we go.
Absolutely. I tell everybody about
Thank you.
You are my favorite podcast.
Thank you.
Great.
And somebody will come up and interrupt me, just make me stop and say, I just want you to know I've seen you out here for years. And I want you to know that there's some days that I just feel like I'm too lazy to get any exercise. And then I think of you.
Oh, no.
And I think, if you can do it, I can do it. And the worst one ever. The worst one ever. And I just sort of try to say, well, you should come see me when I do something impressive.
Oh, my God.
You
are good inspiration porn. That's the point.
Inspiration
I
point. No, I get it.
The worst one ever was years ago. I did a portrait of a disabled couple. It was the first time I'd ever done a couple. And both of them are wheelchair users. And both of them had neuromuscular conditions. And the man of the couple, I don't want to name them because it's a horrible story. The man of the couple could not move his hands. The woman could. And so when I first met them, I got to, be friends. And I noticed that the woman would take his hand and put it on the armrest of her chair and then hold his hand that way. And it was just one of those automatic movements that any married couple's going to do. Like, they're not, it's not performative, they're holding hands. And that's how I painted them, was holding hands. If I remember right. I hope I did. Anyway, so at the time I'm like super poor and I'm selling my work and I'm selling it for really not much money. And it's a big painting on paper. And again, on my website, you can see this thing. And this couple buys it who are collectors. And I'm like, oh, thank you, God. Thank you. I kibble for another month. So I'm at some art event a couple of years later and I run into the woman and she says, we just love that painting. And we hung it in our exercise room. And I exercise every day under this painting. And it really pushes me to work harder.
Oh, God.
And I just thought, who can I get to help me break into her fucking house and take that painting back?
Steal that fucking painting back. Oh, my God.
This is the Bertrand Russell thing again. This is the thing.
It is the Bertrand Russell thing.
That good intentions do is so, it's such a big thing. You have been very generous with your time.
I actually, but wait a second. I actually do want to ask one more thing. I'm so sorry.
Sure. Do with me as you will, Steve.
Okay, if you don't mind, Riva, because I do want to hear about the haunted school that you went to. I'm so sorry, but I want to hear about a haunted school because it's
I knew I liked you. Okay.
Yeah, okay. I want to hear about a haunted school.
So I went to this place called Condon School in Cincinnati. Started in 1963 and I left in 1972.
By the way, do you admire Cincinnati chili, the chili stuff, or do you eat that?
It's the only time I eat red meat.
Oh, really?
And I make it for myself on occasion.
Yeah.
Oh, my God.
Excellent.
Yeah.
It's good stuff.
Really the best one, Skyline, not Skyline.
Yeah.
There was a place called Chili Time.
Chili time.
Chili time.
Chili time.
Right.
That
Next
sounds
time I come.
fancy.
Just curious. Just wanted to know.
Oh, and Grater's ice cream, which is now everywhere.
Oh, yeah. Oh, is that Cincinnati? Okay.
I grew up on that, and so I miss them. Anyway, so Cincinnati, it was really interesting. This school was established in 1912 28. And at the time, it was this super progressive idea of a school for disabled children.
Mhm.
Like, you have to understand, like, because of the Civil War and all of the medical techniques that came out of the war,
Mm.
and like antisepsis too, and things are all happening at the beginning of the century. All these kids are living through impairments that they would have died from. So
yeah.
the hospitals are filling up with kids who aren't dying. Like, well, I guess we should teach them to read.
Gotta do
So
that.
the first special schools were in the hospital. You'd like go down in the basement and they'd teach you like how to read and how to add. And then they ended up with all these kids. Like,
Yeah.
you can't, this is too many kids who aren't dead. So they decided to build a school, and they wanted it to be like really progressive and really accessible for the time in 1928, which, good try. They did their best.
Yeah, sure.
They did their
Yeah.
best.
God bless them.
So it's 63. I start in kindergarten, and I want to say around, so the whole time I'm at the school, kids are dying in my class. Like, a number of kids would die because they had, serious impairments. And no one would ever talk to us about it. It just would be like we would hear Janie died, and now there'd be counselors and grief counselors.
Yeah.
Not a word.
Nothing. Yeah.
So it was like the thing the kids would talk about among ourselves. The grown-ups were absent. So around 7th grade, my best friend decided one day that she was going to show me something. And she took me down in this stairwell that always had this weird cold spot. And so we're going downstairs. She goes, the cold spot? I say, yeah. She goes, well, it's because there's a ghost there. And I'm like, what? And so she tells me all these stories that she's heard about kids that died at the school that are haunting the school. Scares me really badly, but I just avoid the stairway after that. But then a few months later, I get to school really early because sometimes I lived with my grandparents. They had a drugstore, and grandma would drop me at school before the buses came or anything. Not my favorite thing. But okay, I'm down in the basement, and it's this long basement hallway where the cold spot stairs are at one end and the cafeteria is at the other end. And I'm right in front of the elevators, like old birdcage elevators, that you can't push buttons and make it go on. You have to be in the elevator to make it do anything. So I'm sitting waiting for the buses, and all of a sudden I see the elevators start to go up and down by themselves. And they're empty, and you can see because it's glass doors.
Oh, shit.
And nobody's in there. And they're going,
Oh, whoa.
and I'm just like transfixed, thinking that this is some kind of mechanical error.
Yeah.
And then I turn my head, and the hallway down by the stairs is filling up with like this white mist. And I think that the elevators are going Meshuggah because the school's on fire. And so I get up to go. And as I get up, the mist, like in the movies, kind of goes thwip. And then there's a little boy standing there, and he's transparent. And he's like maybe 10 feet away from me. And he's definitely younger than me. I mean, the hair's standing up. Oh,
mine too.
Up my arm again.
Yeah, mine too.
And I can tell that like I can't really see his face that well. He's got dark hair. I remember a blue shirt and kind of dark pants and shoes. And then just sort of a blurriness of the flesh parts, the hands and face and neck and stuff. But it's clear he's a little boy, and he's floating off the ground about 10 feet away from me.
Holy cow.
And I'm just transfixed.
Yeah.
And I'm frozen, and then I'm so scared that I do finally stand up all the way, and I go to run. And in that moment, he disappears, but then I hear his shoes, and his shoes run down the hallway towards the cafeteria. And my shoes run out the door, the bus, the parking lot, and I wait for Julie. But then, so that's like around in 7th grade. And, and then after that, our whole class started holding seances
Oh,
during lunch. So we're little kids with a Ouija board, 7th grade, pubescent. And
that's like a classic age for Ouija boards.
Yeah, totally. Like a Spielberg film.
You should just get it at your bar mitzvah.
Yeah, that too.
Yeah, I'm kind of a Ouija board. That would do it. But so we started doing these seances, and we'd sort of joke around, and and then one day, twice, really weird things happened. One was, so we had we didn't leave class to go through different subjects. We had one room. If you were in 7th grade, you were in one room, and all the subjects would be taught in that room. So different teachers would come in and out. And so there was a science table with like pickled something in it. And one of the specimens shot across the room and hit the lockers. And we thought somebody was in the room and had done it.
In front of a bunch of people.
Kind of behind us. We kind of saw it, but it smashed. And we're all at the table, and ain't nobody left the table.
Right.
So that was one. And then the one that finally made us, I think, stop. So one day we're in there, and this big ball of colored light appears over the table. And some of us saw it and some of us didn't.
Wow.
What color light?
It was just kind of like pulsing different colored lights.
Okay.
Kind of turning.
Wow. That's weird. I've never heard that kind of thing.
It was really weird. It wasn't anything I would have expected.
Yeah. Some people saw, you saw it?
I saw it, and some other people saw it, but not everybody did. But here's the ultimate weird moment with this. Okay. Well, actually, penultimate. We're graduating. It's 8th grade, and that's when Condon would stop. It was K through 8. And so we're having our graduation ceremony, and we're a tiny class, like 12 kids maybe. Mm-hmm. And we're up, seated in a row, up on stage of the auditorium, and we're doing graduation, singing our little songs, and I feel somebody hit me in the back. And I look at my neighbor and I say, Donnie, why'd you hit me? She goes, you hit me. No, I didn't. And we're like whispering this. And afterwards, it turned out that everybody felt someone hit them or slap them in the back.
Wow.
And we're in full view of the auditorium, and nobody saw anything.
And everybody felt this afterwards.
And everybody felt this.
How
at least
weird.
At the time they told. So fast forward.
Super weird.
To 2008, somewhere around there. 2004. And I'm with a film crew. We've gone back to Cincinnati. We're doing David Mitchell and Sharon Snyder. I'm not the David Mitchell. Well, in disability, he's the David Mitchell.
But not the writer, David Mitchell, not the Cloud Atlas guy.
Anyway, so we're back in Cincinnati, and we're filming Condon, which has been condemned. And we're going through the building. And two things happen while we're at the building, and then when we go over to, quote, New Condon. So while we're at the building, there's a caretaker who the whole neighborhood turned into a major drug market, drugs and gangs. And so we had to do all of this very elaborate stuff to stay safe. And there's a caretaker in there. He comes in the morning, he makes sure everything's locked, nobody can get in. And then he does the stuff that he needs to like take apart the rooms or whatever, get things out of there. And then when he leaves, like there's huge chains on the padlocks and things are boarded over, and he always inspects all of the entry points. So while David and Sharon are off filming something, I just ask him quietly if he's ever experienced something weird. And he says, well, yeah, there was this time I was in the building and I kept seeing a kid. And it was freaking me out because there shouldn't be a kid in there and they can really get hurt. And so I'm chasing after this kid. And where's he chasing him? Through that hallway.
Same hallway.
Towards the cafeteria.
Same
and while he's chasing him, he's realizing there are no other footprints other than his. Because it's like an inch of debris, because everything's, dust and paint chips.
Dilapidated,
Very. So no footsteps except his. But he still goes around, he checks all the things. He actually calls the police. The police come to see if there's any way somebody got in. And there just isn't. There just is no way somebody got in.
Same kid.
But it's the same kid.
Same kid.
Then the last thing is that David and Sharon and I go over to New Condon. And there are a few people still working there from the old building. And I lean in and I whisper when we're a little bit alone, did anything weird? And they start telling me about the elevators and how when they were in there after hours, they'd be taking the elevator down from 3 and they'd turn around and somebody's fucking standing behind them or next to them. An adult ghosts.
In the elevator.
In the elevators.
Oh.
And so
all of these things have like other witnesses, other basis.
Corroborating them.
Isn't that amazing?
Crazy.
So there's no reason to ask you if you believe in ghosts because
You must.
you've had a lot of experiences.
Well,
You must.
I do. Here's how I handle it. I knew that there was going to be a point in my life that I could take that kind of thing and just go straight into being, to be in love with the woo-woo. You know, I mean, I'm an artist. We love the imagination and the unexpected. But the people I knew who were deep in the woo-woo.
Here we go.
I knew that this was not so conscious, but I know it was going on. I knew that my life was going to demand that I deal with reality without a break.
Interesting.
Wow.
That I was going to have to be careful about
that's
reality.
Insightful.
That's interesting.
And that if I went off into the woo-woo, the two things would happen. I would get lost. And also no one, when I needed help, like I have all of this ninja skill in talking to doctors. Just point me at a doctor. If you need one,
I'll keep that. Okay,
fly me in, guys.
Interesting.
All doctors speak for you.
Yeah.
You know, it scared me a little to believe too much because I needed people to really believe me when I told them something was happening.
That's powerful.
That's really interesting. That's super interesting.
That was great.
That's
I'm glad
amazing.
we got that story.
You guys are wonderful. This is
likewise. This was one of my favorite ones of these, actually. I really enjoyed it. Yeah, it was awesome. Yeah, thank you.
I hope I get to meet you someday, Paul.
Likewise. Thank you so much, Riva. That was awesome. Awesome.
Oh, good.
Really, thank you.
I was pretty scared to do this, so
really?
I'm glad it went well.
Went very well.
It was fantastic. Really awesome. Thank you so much. That was a good chinwag.
Amazing chinwag with an amazing person. Yeah, we learned a lot.
That was a really good chinwag. That was like exceptional. I enjoyed that.
She's really good at, I think, explaining, you know, her own history, but also these complex issues in a really understandable and funny way. She's got a great sense of humor.
She really does. Dark sense of humor too.
Yeah,
actually, which
just
is
like
always which is always good. I definitely appreciate that. Well, she was awesome. Thank you. Thanks to her for being here. Steve, thank you for being here as always.
And thank you, Paul.
Wow. Okay. This is great. This is very warm. I like this. That's nice. Very good. And thank you, listeners. I think in just a few short days, we'll probably have a bonus wag for you.
Bonus wag.
Bonus
coming in.
wag. Yep. So be sure to check that out. And until then, friends, Romans, countrymen, wag on.
Wag on. Chinwag is a production of Treefort Media and Touchy Feely Films, hosted and executive produced by Paul Giamatti and Stephen Asma. Executive producers for Treefort are Kelly Garner and Lisa Ammerman. Dan Carey is executive producer for Touchy Feely. Our series producer is Rachel Whitley Bernstein. Original theme music by Luke Top, with additional music by Via Mardot. Oscar Guido is our executive in charge of production. Tom Monahan is head of audio for Treefort. Audio production supervision by Jared Brom and Matt Dyson. Editing and mixing by Jeff Neal. Animation created by Alex Sokol. Research assistance by Aidan Brooks. Lastly, for more information, go to chinwagpod.fm and find us on Instagram or TikTok at chinwagpod or on Twitter at chinwag_pod.